Should you use cold outbound email, LinkedIn outbound, or cold calling in your GTM go-to-market strategy? This is a question I get all the time. The purpose of this video is to get into when you should use these channels and why, but also I want you guys to get clear on the cost to acquire customer based upon these options. I'm going to give you a simple version of how I think about this and how you can take this into your own business. So let's get into it. So the first thing is cold email is notoriously low converting, which means that you could send to 100,000 people, as you can see here, and you're going to have a problem with getting responses. So literally out of 100,000 people, you're only going to get about 2,500 people to reply. And most of them are going to be out of offices, not interested, that type of thing. Take me off your list, or what's this about? Kind of confusion. So the reality is out of 100,000 people, you're actually only going to get about 125 interested people. People that are going to say, yeah, tell me more. I want to meet with you. What's the price points? Buying type of questions. So that's crazy, right? It's a near 1%, 1.25% of total people emailed are actually going to be interested. Now, I've seen this range. So I've seen this go up to 20%. That's a very rare case. I think a 3 to 4% is really nice. If you're between 2 and 3%, that's okay. If it dips below 2%, I think you can tolerate it, but I wouldn't say it's a good campaign if it goes below 1%. And on this, I've seen this go to 20%, 30%. On average, it's pretty stable at around 5% of interested prospects. And this is the total 5% of the prospects replied, to be clear. Now, of those, you can expect around anywhere on the low end. I've seen 15% set. I've seen it go up to 80% on meeting set. That's very rare. It's typically in this 30 to 40% range. So that means of the people that are interested, how many actually go to set meetings? And then from that, 75% show up, 60% will get qualified. Actually, this usually comes down a little bit. This is probably closer to 40%. And then 5% in this scenario are won deals if you're at a 25% close rate. So my point here is that out of 100,000 people that you've emailed, only about 5 will actually go on to buy. Now compare that to LinkedIn outbound. You have 100,000 people you prospect, you get a 30% connection acceptance rate, you get a 20% prospect reply rate. And these are ballpark numbers, these can vary, these are debatable. But the point is that then you go on to the same, this is a little bit lower meeting set rate, meeting held rate, as well as deals qualified and deals won. Look at the difference, 5 deals to 210. So the question is, why the heck would I ever use cold email? We're going to talk about that in a second. And then the third thing here is cold calling. Another 100,000. Again, this is low. This is debatable. Some people will say this can go up to 15 to 20%, depending upon region or offer, how clean the cell phone list is that you're going after. But the bottom line is that you can use this as a very broad benchmark across all industries, which probably isn't good for your particular industry, but use it as an example. So 5,500 people answer. Of those, about 4.6% will actually go to set meetings. And then let's say you get 190 that are held because 75% of these actually show up. Then 50% are qualified. This is probably lower than this, 30%. And then we're saying here it's a 25% close rate. So deals won is 21. So it looks LinkedIn is a grand slam home run. You should just focus there. And now here's the thing. It's each one of these have a trade-off. The reality is that LinkedIn might not work for you. For example, I have a business that's a SaaS business in the oil and gas industry. It focuses on very specific field level workers. They don't have LinkedIn profiles. So this isn't even an option. Now, the dirty truth about LinkedIn is that there literally is a limit. So you can't send to more than 150 connections in a day. Realistically, if you don't want to get your account banned, you shouldn't send more than 50. And so you get literally run out of the ability to reach out to people. So it doesn't scale. Now there's ways to get around that. You can have social selling with your team. You can make sure that they're also sending out to their limit on their own accounts. Then also you can do what I do, which is a lot of organic brand building posts and lead generation posts that generate thousands of comments. All of those comments turn into direct messages. It bypasses the limits of LinkedIn. And now you've turned your actual content into a flywheel for lead generation. Outbound plus the inbound is what solves for that. But the point is it's not a fully scalable solution. I can't just pour more gasoline on the fire to make it as big as I want. I'm stuck based upon the constraints of the algorithm for my posts, how many followers I have, and also the limits on my ability to do outbound. So this really has its limits, but it is such an amazing channel. If your people live on LinkedIn and they're there, then you should be taking advantage. Now, one of the problems with cold email is that it has low conversion rates, but why would people use it? It's because it's amazing for scale. I can go send 100,000 emails today and then another 100,000 emails tomorrow, as long as the total addressable market is there. The problem is that people think because I can just scale immediately, I should use it for my market. And for many B2B businesses, their total addressable market is extremely small. And so the problem with that is that they have, say, 20,000 people in their market and they're blasting the entire market and they've just completely saturated it. And generally speaking, I wouldn't advise to message those same people more than every 60 days at the most. Likely you should wait 90 days or 120 days to re-email them so you don't burn them out on your brand. Now, This is why you should have organic, good content posts so that when people land on your page, they actually want to come back and re-engage. And when you send the cold email, they're like, oh, I know this guy, I trust this guy, which will boost all these conversion rates. But the point here is that this is a one-trick pony on a particular list of people until you blast them all and then wait 90 days. So if you have a small TAM, you can run out of this very quickly. And because the conversion rates are so small, if you only have 10,000 people, you're going to end up with potentially even 0 deals won. And it's going to look like a completely failed channel. So where I have seen cold email work the best is when you have really large total addressable markets, you have a very clear and easy offer to make, like agency services that every single person wants more, for example, ad leads or creative for their videos or whatever it might be. If you have a very niche offering and it's a very small market, I would avoid cold email like the plague. In addition, cold email is predicated on your understanding of your ideal customer profile and the messaging very tightly. So if your hook is off, if your subject line is off, if your body copy is off, what you're saying in there in terms of the problems you're speaking to, the solutions that you offer, your call to actions, if any of that is off, you are done. In addition, cold email is extremely difficult because there's a lot of technical aspects of it. You have to be really good at building large lists, cleaning up the emails. You have to make sure you know how to buy a bunch of domains, which is the actual website domain that you use to then send the email from, which is your inboxes. Bennett Next Gen Sales Leaders or Sales Systems is a good example of an inbox, and the domain is Next Gen Sales Leaders or Systems. And so if you don't have enough of those and you're not following best practices, and there's a whole seminar I could do on that, you're not going to be able to send enough emails and you'll get into the spam. And so there's a technical element of getting delivery. Whereas on LinkedIn, you can basically just go ahead and send as many LinkedIn DMs as you want, and you won't be banned as long as you don't go over the limit. Same thing with cold calling. You can keep calling and calling until the person either blocks you or they answer, but you're not going to be fundamentally blocked by some algorithm because of a technical limitation. Cold email is difficult. It can be expensive, and there's a lot more to say there, but it is amazing if you have a broad offer with a massive market and you want to go very fast. I suggest cold email for established companies that are doing more than $1 million in revenue, have a broad offer, and have a massive TAM. So now for startups, you want to get your messaging right, because even if you have a large TAM and you have a proven offer at a startup, you might not know your messaging really well. And so in order to get your messaging well, I highly recommend cold calling, especially using what I call the mom test. If you get in my free school group, there's the mom test, and you can go and learn how to create survey questions to come up with an understanding of your ideal customer profile. So you can build good scripts, build good products, and build a bunch of other stuff. But the point is you can iterate in live time on a call. You can get on the call with these people, and within 10, 20 conversations, you have a deep understanding of who they are. If you're recording the call, you can use the sound bites from their responses to write good copy. So generally speaking, as a startup, I would start here. I think the moral of the story here is that there is not one answer to which channel you should use. It depends. It depends on what kind of company you have. It depends on the offer. It depends upon the size of the market. It depends if you're a mature company with a proven messaging or if you are a startup. Even if you are a proven company with a proven offer, but you have never done cold email, you probably go and synthesize a bunch of responses from your cold calls to listen to what people are saying, use those keywords and plug them into the cold email for what your hook should be and what your offer should be. So there's a lot more I could say on cold email and LinkedIn outbound messaging and what you should say, but you got to understand that there's limitations here. Now, the final thing I want to finish up with is this idea that this is just the beginning. The actual cost that matters is a cost which has to do with your post-lead capture funnel. So everything after meeting set and held is what I call post-lead capture. So let's go into an example here. And this is really where I want to get you guys to, is that if you actually look at this, and I'm going to take a look, these are very simple examples. So I know that we could beat this up and add a lot more variables and context to this, but I want you guys to understand this, is that if you have cold email, you're looking at, typically you need somebody to manage the responses. So you need an SDR. Yes, you can do it some with AI. Yes, you can do it with an AI SDR or some type of virtual assistant. But the bottom line is you need somebody to respond. And this is pretty standard benchmark of what you could expect there. You need CRM technology. You're going to need all the email software. There's a whole seminar I could do on this. There's 10 tools you're going to need, maybe 5 tools on the low end. And then you're going to need your email infrastructure. Excuse me for the misspelling here. But you need to have enough domains and inboxes, and those cost money per month. So when you add this all up, this isn't including agency service fees. This is assuming you're doing it yourself. You're still probably in the hole around $8,200 a month. So assuming you get around 20 meetings, because you get 5 meetings a week from it, and this is probably lower than that. It's probably closer to 17 or something like that. Oops, let me fix that. This is, let's say, 17 on this world. And I'm bypassing a full understanding of how much infrastructure you need, what your TAM is. That's a whole nother call. But let's just assume this is correct. So you have 17 meetings. This is your cost. That means you're spending this amount per meeting. On LinkedIn, you still have your SDR costs, you still have your CRM costs, but you'll see you have a much lower cost in terms of the technology. You don't need your email infrastructure. You don't need all this software, and you can get away with this. Now, you might argue back, actually, you do need this. You need Clay, and that's expensive. You need it to verify that the information is correct. If you want to do fancy AI written things, you can do that. I think you can get away with just LinkedIn automation, Sales Navigator, and a clear understanding of your ideal customer profile. You can pull 500 or so people pretty quickly by yourself, and you can be off to the races as a full cycle SDR or a sales rep. So let's say you're spending $5,200, you get 30 meetings because it's just more effective than cold email in terms of the conversion rate. So your cost comes down, okay? And then on cold calling, same thing. You don't have the Sales Navigator, although you might, but assuming that you've pulled the lists and they've already been loaded for you, now you're just cold calling, then it's $5,000. Again, I know there's so many other costs you're probably thinking, but what about this cost? And what about that cost? I get it. Let's just go with this for the sake of this argument, because you'll see where I'm going. So these are the different costs per meeting. Now, why do I care about that? I'm plugging that in up here. So this is my cost per meeting. So let's just say for a flat round $400, it's typically in this range of $250 to $1,000. I've seen this go to $3,000 if it's like an enterprise level deal, but you're typically in this ballpark. And then you can see for 100 meetings, you're spending $40,000, okay? Now, here's the wild part, is that this is actually only about 10% of the cost, 10 to 20% of the cost. Because when you do the math on the post lead capture funnel, that is meeting set, but then they have to show up. So let's say 80% show up. So that means you have 80 meetings, but you still have the same cost. So now 80 meetings divided by 40,000, or 40,000 divided by 80, now it's $500, okay? Not $400. And then let's say 30% are qualified. That means 30% of the 80, so you have 24 left. Now you're spending $1,600 for a qualified meeting, not the $400 you thought you were when you said it. And then let's say only 30% close, which is actually a good close rate off qualified meetings. That means that only 7.2 out of the 100 actually close. So your cost to acquire in this scenario is $5,500. And that's only on your selling costs. That's not including like any other overhead. That doesn't include your profit margin or anything else. So your cost to acquire here, just on the cost of like literally your sales reps, your sales technology, your costs on cold email or whatever else you're paying, in this scenario is $5,500. So that means to get an ROI, you need to have an average order value that's higher than this, or at least an LTV that is significantly higher than this. And that's why for me, if you're doing outbound generally, if you don't have at least an LTV of like $20,000 or $30,000 lifetime value, you probably shouldn't be doing outbound. You probably shouldn't be in like B2B business, frankly. But I would say the low end is I've seen people be at a $3,000 price point, but the people renew, the customers renew for 3 years. And so it's a $36,000 LTV. Now you might have cash flow issues in that scenario where you're paying more money up front to acquire the customer and you're going in the hole, but you expect them to retain over time. This gets into your business model. But these are the basic unit economics. And so when people ask me, what should I use? I say, look, it really doesn't matter ultimately, as long as you can get the meeting set. Now, it matters in terms of what I said over here, which is, will it even work for you? But if it works, then you're probably going to be in this ballpark. You're probably going to be around $400 to $1,000 in terms of the cost per meeting set, probably a little bit lower. I shoot for 200 to 300, 400, something in that range. But no, that's not where your cost is. Your cost is post lead capture. And that's where if you can get the people to show up more, if you can get people to be more qualified from the get-go because you have better quality leads or contact lists on the front end, you should do better. So this is how you can think about cost. You need a spreadsheet like this. You need to understand your basic inputs on your costs. And by the way, I've made this so simple. I have a full-fledged diagram on how I even come up with just cold email, like how many meetings do they expect and how many emails are sent and what's my cost per domain. So there's much more thorough analysis of this if you want to get into it. And I'm happy to do that. If you want to jump on a call with me, you want to analyze your current outbound flow, let's do it. So go ahead and let me know if you guys have questions. I hope this has been helpful, but this is how you should think about which channel you should use. I'll talk to you guys on the next one.